Hi, I'm Brian Allgeier, the Creative Director of Ratchet Clank Future: A Crack in Time, and I'm here to talk about my top 10 favorite weapons of all time. The first one is the GROOVITRON. It is a disco ball that Ratchet would throw out into a group of enemies and watch them spontaneously dance. It was what we called a comedic and strategic weapon. You would get some good laughs watching the enemies dance, but it would also stun them long enough that you could then take them out. One of my favorite weapons from going commando is the lava gun. This was a gun that Ratchet could use against large groups of enemies. He could spin around in circles, the enemies would come up to him, they'd get burned by the fire, and it was very handy in tight situations. The lava gun later would upgrade to the meteor gun, but it was interesting because we got a lot of complaints or criticisms for changing the functionality of the weapon. And so when we put the lava gun back into a pure arsenal, we decided to change it to the liquid nitrogen gun, which had the same effect as the lava gun, except it would freeze enemies. And then there was the Agents of Doom that was in the first Ratchet & Clank. Ratchet would throw out this egg that would spawn these little robot dudes, which would then track down enemies and explode on contact. We brought them back for the third game where they upgraded to the Agents of Dread. They flew around with these little jetpacks and would fire out rockets, blowing up enemies to bits. Next we've got the suck cannon. This was a classic weapon that was introduced in the first Ratchet & Clank and allowed Ratchet to suck up enemies and then shoot them back out at other enemies. So it was very satisfying to fill up your suck cannon with a bunch of bad guys and then fire them back out at their friends. It was also useful in sucking up crates and bolts, so you could collect things from afar. In the first Ratchet & Clank there was the decoy glove, and this was an inflatable Ratchet that you could toss out. And it's kind of funny because here we've got this big inflatable toy that was obviously not Ratchet, yet all the enemies were so dumb that they thought it was him. What was really fun about that weapon was we got these cool promotional items, which were these small inflatable Ratchets that we had around the office. Every once in a while someone might like walk into one or step on one and you hear this big pop sound. Another fun weapon, which was really a device, was Mr. Zircon, and this was kind of like previous weapons that were synthenoids. These are small robots that would float above Ratchet's shoulder, and they would shoot any target that was within range. He would have a taunt or phrase for every enemy that he killed.
Stupid lizard thingy, Mr. Zircon will kill you.
In the third Ratchet & Clank game, we introduced the Rift INDUCER, and that was a weapon where Ratchet could fire out these black holes that would suck enemies into them. Later it would upgrade to the Rift Ripper that would suck enemies in and shoot out lightning bolts to take them out. We also have the Bouncer, which was a weapon we designed at the last minute. It later upgraded the Heavy Bouncer, which would shoot out this large bomb that would split off into little bomblets that would then bounce around and track towards enemies and blow them up. It was very satisfying to use. A great weapon from the third game was the Plasma Whip, and this was a great melee weapon that was a fiery whip that Ratchet could use to sweep enemies and take them out. It later would upgrade to the Quantum Whip, which would send out waves of energy, taking out even more bad guys. And finally there's the RYNO, which was a series staple. This was the big uber weapon that everyone was saving their bolts up for. You had to oftentimes get millions of bolts to be able to buy this highly expensive weapon that was super powerful and would obliterate all enemies on screen. It was very satisfying to use and very hard to get. In Ratchet Clank Future Tools of Destruction, the way the player got the RYNO was finding lots of little blueprints, and they had to travel all around the galaxy to find the blueprints to give to the smuggler, who would then later assemble the RYNO for you. We've had the RYNO, the RYNO 2, the RYNO, which I believe stood for rip you 3 new ones. There was also the RYNO 4. Came after the RYNO 3.
Very clever.
Yeah, it was very clever. So Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time is coming this fall with a whole new arsenal of weapons, and maybe you'll see one of yours in the lineup.